Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. This is show number 233. It's Wednesday, the 20th of April, and it is actually a recorded show. Having said that, we've still got plenty to look at today. I'll be showcasing a conference in virtual reality and how that could be applied to road safety. We'll have a very quick look at the updated highway code, which is now available in book form. Smart lampposts light the streets and also charge swappable bike batteries too. Spray on mud is a must-have accessory. A New South Wales teen is warning drivers of speed traps with police blessing, rather astonishingly. And we'll use that story to morph into one on today's discussion point, which is how local councils will very soon have the ability to fine you for minor traffic offences. So this is what you should be looking out for. So settle yourselves down for the next 30 minutes or so. Don't forget these shows go out Wednesdays and Sundays at 11, normally live, but today is a recording. If you do have a comment, anything that you want to say, I'm more than happy to listen to that, but I won't be able to get back to you live on air today, or it'll probably take a few days at the end of the show as well. So anyway, on with the news. Now, the first thing I wanted to say was don't forget that the first of the survival skills I'll start again. It's the May live event, isn't it? Overtaking. This is a live webcast that I'm running on a monthly basis. And this one's called Overtaking, Making It Out the Other Side. And what I try to explain is that whilst overtaking is one of these activities we do tend to enjoy on a motorcycle, it's important not to take it for granted because it does lead to a significant number of rider fatalities when things go wrong. I'll give you some hints from my time as a courier when I wasn't exactly hanging around at times on how to stay out of trouble, how to predict it most importantly, how to recognise what could go wrong and so not to make progress. So that's Wednesday the 4th of May at 8 p.m. Tickets cost £5 and the link on the top of the post will give you the booking URL. So right, that's my live event Overtaking Wednesday 4th of May at 8 p.m. So do pop along if you want to find out a little bit more about overtaking from a courier's point of view. Right, okay, now here's a little story for you. The other day I was sat in the front seat of a car. The driver alongside me was a lad in his 20s. He was messing around with a mobile phone. He was laughing and joking with the two girls in the back seat. I was being thrown around because the car was lurching and swaying thanks to the driver's erratic steering inputs. And just as one of the two girls tried to grab the phone, a tractor pulled out of an entrance just ahead of us on the left. And when I came to, the girl was spread-eagled on the dashboard and bonnet, having gone through the windscreen headfirst. The other occupants were in shock. Emergency vehicles and personnel were on the scene and treating the injured. A police helicopter was visible circling overhead whilst I was being injected in the leg. Right, okay, now fairly obviously this wasn't a real event, and actually the seat that I was sat in was at the Firebike Road Safety Conference way back in 2016, and I was using a virtual reality headset, and I was watching a short 360-degree movie of this particular crash, and despite the whole thing being shot with a couple of GoPros taped back to back, and literally I mean that, and the whole thing was actually played out via a smartphone onto a relatively inexpensive VR headset. The experience was surprisingly immersive. It was actually a stunning eye-opener into what VR technology could actually achieve, and it was so dramatic. I can still remember parts of that particular event happening. It really was, you know, as much as you can imagine being in the middle of something like that, it was pretty close to it. So I was very interested to see that Road Safety GB are actually supporting the UK's first conference, which is entirely focused on road and community safety via a virtual reality education. Now, it's been organised by First Car and the ICE Hub, and the aim of the event is to increase awareness of this technology, to improve understanding of its application in an educational setting, and to help develop robust delivery plans to include the use of VR. Now, the event takes place on Wednesday, the 19th of October 2022, almost 6 years to the day after one of the local fire services put that video together that I sat through. And it's hosted by the West Midlands Police at their Tally Ho Conference and Banqueting Centre in Edgbaston. The content of ICE Live 2022 is designed to appeal, it says, to a wide range of professionals who are both actively using VR and those keen to expand their knowledge of the technology, and those who wish to explore how it can be used to enhance their educational work. And the conferences day are due to feature more than a dozen speakers during the day from a wide range of private and public sector backgrounds. Personally, I think VR is a really solid way forward for training in areas that you can't train people to deal with. You cannot train people to deal with an emergency like a tractor pulling out in front of them. And you can't give them an insight into the consequences of getting it wrong either. And that's the big weakness, in my opinion, with the current hazard perception test as delivered to new drivers and riders. Nothing ever goes wrong. If you sit through those video clips, it all pans out nicely in the end. Even if you don't do anything, the car or the bike you're on just carries on going. No problems at all. So that is an interesting use of the technology, which I'm certainly interested to see how that goes. I just hope, as I say, that it can be kept to a level where ordinary trainers like me can actually access it. Now, so I've mentioned the Highway Code very briefly, and I will, because the new book is actually out in the shops. Now, you'll recall that it was some weeks ago that the new rules concerning the way drivers should deal with more vulnerable road users, the hierarchy of harm, as it's called, with the sort of big vehicles like buses and lorries at the top, then cars, then motorcycles, then horse riders, cyclists and pedestrians at the bottom, and how each of the tiers should look after everybody below them on that hierarchy. And the new rules, which include giving way to pedestrians when you're turning into a side road, if they are waiting to cross, or allowing a cyclist who is on your inside to pass you up the inside, even when you're turning left. Those are new rules in the Highway Code. Well, the paper book is finally available, and you can go to the .gov.uk website and look at it, of course, online there for Nout. The paperback will cost you money. Now, don't forget, if you want to check out these shows, they normally go out live on Wednesdays and Sundays. This is the third in a row of the recorded shows while I'm away from home. 11 a.m. they will go out. You'll be able to catch up on YouTube an hour or so later, amongst other places. YouTube, if you want to get the back issues, is usually easiest because they are in a playlist. So that's where to go to catch a show that you potentially missed. Right, now, a couple of weeks back at the end of March, I talked about the UK government's new EV infrastructure strategy. Now, they're planning to put in a network of 300,000 extra EV charging points by 2030, and that plan's already come under fire for its failure to address the needs of PTW owners. Now, car drivers are being increasingly catered for with roadside charging points, although there are still none within half a mile of my front door. And these include charging points fitted to streetlights. And oddly enough, I actually parked behind a van which was charging with a wire led into the bottom of a streetlight. And it wasn't somebody sort of undoing the maintenance panel on the front and wiring it in for themselves. It is a genuine charger. I believe it's Siemens who put those in. But the problem is that these are still street lights apart. And if you can't charge at home, the reality is that they also address to the needs of motorcyclists, either in terms of security or convenience, come to that. But right on cue, Taiwan offers an alternative technology. Here is the picture I wanted to show you. So let's get that up. There it is. Ion X, that is the battery swapping technology currently being used by Kimco, the Taiwanese motorcycle manufacturer. And they have a number of these battery swapping points. You basically plug your expended battery into an empty slot and take out a new one. But where do you site these swap stations? Now, the obvious place to put them would be in filling stations. If you're not going to be using petrol pumps, you could possibly take out a little bit of space to put one of these swap stations in. But if you've been round the average town or city centre over the last few years, one thing you probably have noticed is a lot of filling stations have actually gone missing. Now, more and more of the filling stations are actually out on the fringe of a town, because the land's obviously ripe for development, and that's what it's been used for. It's been used to build offices and houses and even shops on. So potentially, if you're doing a sort of city centre riding job, just commuting short distances or doing something like food delivery work, you'd potentially have to ride out of your way to find a swap station. So Kimco have actually come up with a new alternative, and this is it. It's effectively a streetlight. The streetlight, as you can see at the bottom there, it incorporates a number of the swappable battery packs. The light you can see there also incorporates a solar generator at the top, so that that can be used to support the charging of the batteries. Now, battery swap technology has gone through the roof in Taiwan. There are apparently more swap stations than there are filling stations now, but one of the challenges is finding a location. So it does actually make a lot of sense to use a charging point like this, because if you think about it, the power supply is already in place. And since the swap station built into the streetlight actually only houses a very limited number of batteries, the implication is that first of all, the real estate that the light takes up shouldn't be dramatic, and the existing power supply should be able to handle the recharging demands, unlike the fast charger that you need to charge your car up in sort of 30 minutes or whatever. And there's an extra benefit as well. In the event of a power outage, something that happened just a few weeks ago in Taiwan, the batteries in the streetlights can keep those lights and also traffic lights operating. And that's exactly what happened. Kimco's competitor Gogoro was actually able to keep its thousands of battery swap stations up and running, despite the power outage that blacked out most of the country. So Kimco say that smart street lights like this provide a solution that mutually benefits both smart city operators and consumers. Right, so don't forget, if you do enjoy the show, please do pop over to my coffee page. If you buy me a cuppa over there, which will set you back a stunning £3, you also open up a month's access to around 800 better biking articles from the Facebook archives. All the posts go back to 2014. And you can find 100 from each year, roughly speaking, from my Tips on Tuesday and Skills on Saturday series, all the way up to 2020, which I'm actually uploading at the moment, and 2021 is already in place. And of course, I'm also writing 2022s as we go. So there are more and more of these articles going up year on year. Become a subscriber for £3 a month, and you open up some more specialist access to articles. So do pop over there, take a look. You can read some of it for free, and if you feel that it's worth your cuppa, I'd be very grateful. It keeps me writing more. So, okay, anyway, moving on rapidly. What else is in the news? Well, it's the latest must-have accessory. If your adventure bike is just too pristine after its winter spent in the garage, you may need to gain some credibility as quickly as possible. So here is your answer. it is indeed, it is spray on mud. And your buddies will hopefully think that you spent the winter riding off-road somewhere rather than sitting in the comfort of your work from home office or driving to work with the hot air on in the car. Apparently the mud is real mud. It's collected locally to the manufacturing plant. We use the term manufacturing fairly loosely. It's filtered to remove the stones, though, which is a bit of a shame because, of course, if you left those in and sprayed your bodywork with them, you could have added some equally authentic stone chips to the paintwork. Apparently, the bottle there was retailing at $7.95. It was selling well in London and the US, apparently. It probably won't surprise you to discover that the idea for spray on mud came about over a couple of pints at the local. And frankly, it's an idea that really should have stayed there. Right, now out in New South Wales, police have actually supporting a teenager who's been warning drivers they're approaching hidden speed cameras. Bo Jackson has been spending time before and after work to search out what he considers unfair speed cameras in the Central Coast area north of Sydney. The 17-year-old then stands next to his motorcycle with a handwritten sign. In a local magazine, Jackson was quoted as saying that what he wanted to do was to look out for people who are having a pretty hard time right now. And he explained that people can cop a $170 fine for going just 4 kilometers over the limit. And right now people are struggling, so I want to help them. He points out that traps are often set up to ping people a few kilometers over the limit at the bottom of a hill, and that's unfair. But he says that if it was in a school zone or on a stretch of road where people are speeding, I wouldn't warn anyone. And rather than using hidden signs, Jackson believes there should be visible signs for drivers instead. Now, naturally, social media has had mixed reactions. One response was good on him to help others out in trying times. Traffic fines are a profit milking cow and nothing to do with safety whatsoever. It's a fairly common view. But another said his efforts are misguided. What's wrong with motorists following the rules and obeying the limits? Take responsibility for your own actions. Now, fairly astonishingly, Jackson has actually consulted with the local police, who apparently believe that what he's doing is actually a community service by making drivers slow down. Here, of course, in the UK, there are actually videos on YouTube, you don't have to look very far to find them, of people confronting camera van operators and actually being threatened with prosecution for obstructing the police in the course of their duties. So I'd be interested if anybody feels up to it. Try contacting your local camera safety partnership and see what they suggest if you fancy standing in front of it with a placard saying "Speed Camera Van Ahead." Right, as I said, that will merge us neatly into today's discussion point, because this is also about what some people consider a cash cow. And that is the fact that local councils are soon going to be able to fine you for minor traffic offences. Now, as I previously reported back in January on Elevenses, from May, all councils across England and Wales can actually apply to take the responsibility away from the police and issue fines themselves for a whole raft of traffic offences. And they'll be using automatic number plate recognition, ANPR cameras, and they'll be located near potential offence locations to catch drivers in the act. So notice that they will be located near potential offence locations. Now, some of the reports have described the offences as minor, although I have to say some I would say are fairly serious, such as making illegal U-turns, driving in cycle lanes, going the wrong way down a one-way street, or, as I spotted the Deliveroo rider do today, just turn completely the wrong side of a large central traffic island in the road. I've no idea why he bothered, probably because he could, and it cut across the front of a car coming the other way. But basically, he pulled straight into my path as I was coming up to the same traffic island from the correct direction. So I really wouldn't mind somebody like that getting a ticket, although the chances of the bike being registered in his name, I should have thought, fairly remote. But anyway, councils in London and Cardiff already have the right to enforce these types of traffic violations, so the move will bring the rest of the country in line. And the first fine fines are set to go out in June. Now, not surprisingly, the scheme is actually facing criticism from motoring organisations, including the RAC, who are raising concerns that drivers could be exploited by cash-strapped councils issuing these PCNs to drivers by doing things like monitoring box junctions and creating hard to spot gateways in low traffic areas. Now, it seems that a combined £58.2 million in these fines was pulled in by London and Cardiff in the financial year 2018 to 2019, which would have been the year pre-COVID. One of the most contentious issues in London has been the enforcement of box junctions and vehicles stopping in the yellow boxes actually getting fines. A certain person who doesn't live very far away from me picked up one of those just a year or so ago. Now, it seems that more than half the income that was generated by these fines did actually come from box junction cameras. Now, box junctions are designed to ease congestion on busy junctions, but unfortunately, what happens is when the junction gets over congested and there is queuing traffic all the way round, it then can become very difficult either to avoid stopping in the box junction when everything comes to a little bit of a sudden stop when somebody pulls into the queue and brings another vehicle to an unexpected halt, or when you're trying to get out of a side turning into a box junction and there's nowhere else to go. So yeah, moderate traffic, box junctions fine. When it's nose to tail, they are mission impossible. So have a quick look at this particular junction. Now I'm going to go full screen for that because it needs all the space it can get. That is a Google aerial shot of the Hammersmith one-way system. And it's one of those it's one of the busiest junctions in London. And frankly, I'm amazed that they managed to find a moment when the traffic was actually so light. Normally it's pretty much nose to tail across here, and therein lies the problem. As I said, sometimes the only way to get out of the box junction is to or into the gyratory system is to actually move forward into the box junction and just hope that the traffic ahead of you moves. If you time it right, you'll get away with it. If you time it wrong, you won't. The problem is that it usually results in several queuing vehicles all trying to get to the same bit of road. Now, if I can just zoom in, if you can see the box junction there, it's just partly obscured by the flyover, but what you can see is that there's 4 lanes coming forward from the lights and they're merging into traffic which is actually coming in from the bottom right hand corner. And I happened to be there a couple of years ago, and a gap appeared. It was in my lane. I started to move forward. The Uber driver alongside me in the other lane started to go for the same gap, which would meant basically he was cutting across my lane. And I have to admit, I just put my foot down and blocked him out, and I left him stranded on the yellow markings. But that is the typical way these things work. It's the bravest who tends to win. Now, between 2016 and 2018, just one box junction, and I suspect it's probably that one there on this traffic gyratory, actually turned up £1.2 million in fines. Now, an RAC poll found that 57% of drivers are in favour of box junctions generally and being enforced to keep traffic moving. But I do suspect that many of those live outside the big cities where people are picking up fines for these things. Now, the RAC actually said that they found design flaws that caused drivers to become trapped through no fault of their own. Very much the situation I would imagine that I've just mentioned. Now, others are poorly maintained. It's hard to see that you're actually approaching a box junction. Then, of course, it's very easy to get stranded in them. So Nicholas Lyles, who's the head of roads police at RAC, states that there's no guidance on the design, on the maintenance, or the enforcement of box junctions, which opens the door for councils to take advantage. And one particular junction has actually been dubbed a trap in the popular press. Now, let me just show you that one too. Apparently, over 2,000 drivers a month fall foul of this particular junction as they get caught out by the light phasing. Now, what happens is the further signal, that's the one that you can see that is red in the diagram there, turns red before the one behind it turns red. So basically, what happens is drivers see the further light is green, they carry on through the junction, it then turns green, the traffic ahead of them stops, and somebody unwary ends up straddling the box junction. Now, critics say that it could easily be sorted out simply by reversing the phasing order of the lights, so that the lights controlling the box junction turn red first, and then a moment later the lights just up ahead turn red, and that way anyone who's actually sort of in the box junction will clear the box junction or be stopped short by the red light, and that way it'll stop the problem, it'll stop wedging people in that box junction. But is it likely to change? Probably not, because Hammersmith and Fulham apparently raked in no less than 12.8 million in box junction fines between 2016 and 2018. And that, of course, at the moment is a very significant income to the local council treasure chest. Now, the RAC have written to the DFT requesting an update to the guidance on box junctions, including making it clear to local authorities what the minimum standard for design and conditions should be before letting them actually begin enforcement. But the government's transport department remains adamant that present guidance is sufficient. And of course, it gets worse because the lockdown created a lot of low traffic neighbourhoods. There's plenty of evidence to suggest that councils are making lots of money from these too. Now, whilst some councils installed physical barriers such as large planters across roads, which led into these now low traffic neighbourhoods, after complaints from emergency services who found they were actually physically blocking all traffic, including fire engines and ambulances, they now often have a vehicle-sized gap in the middle. And if you don't spot warning signs that you're not supposed to go through there, maybe because there's a van, a high-sided van parked up against the no entry sign or the no access sign, you may not realize that you're going through one of these until you get the ticket through the post. Now, I got caught by a barrier exactly like this myself a couple of years ago. Circumstances were these: it was nighttime, it was dark, it was torrential rain, so I was struggling to see where I was going anyway. The street lighting on that particular road was poor. The road on one side was narrowed by roadworks, which meant that I was actually on the wrong side of the centre line, and there were cars parked very close on double yellow lines up towards the barrier itself. And I simply didn't realise that I wasn't supposed to go through the gap in the middle, but I was supposed to go through the pinch points left and right of the big opening. I simply didn't see them until I was right on top of it. So the fine duly dropped through the post, and though I appealed it, I was shown a photograph taken on a clear day when there were no roadworks and no awkwardly parked cars, and the signs were clearly visible, and my appeal was rejected. And locally here, we also have the a sort of increasing range of barriers on local residential roads. The bad news is that to do a fairly simple journey to get onto the main A5 out of London, I now have to drive for an extra 5 minutes and an extra half hour to get onto it, which is just completely bonkers. And although you can drive through these gaps, they are monitored. But at least they're relatively obvious. I barely avoided turning right into a new trap last year. Now, this is a street that is now closed to right turns off the main road between 8:30 and 9:30 and 3:30 and 4:30. It's school run time, and it's still two-way. You can still drive up and down it both ways, but you just cannot do that right turn at a particular time of the day. Now, you have to be able to see, first of all, the no right turn sign, which isn't so easy because it's in a bus lane. Or the other side of a bus lane, I should point out. And you have to be able to read the little plate underneath it, which sets out those times, at the same time as you're reading the fact that there is a no right turn sign, trying to work out when it doesn't apply. So it's really not easy on a busy road. And basically, it's problems like this that probably enabled Southwark council in South London to get fines posted out to people to the tune of 6.62 million from just 5 cameras in a low traffic neighbourhood in Dulwich in 2021. A single street in Hackney between February 2020 and August 2021 apparently raked in 4.12 millions in fines. So again, there is a lot of questions about whether or not these things should be easier to see, and whether there should be consistency in how they're designed. Nicholas Lies of the RAC again, he said there will be a high degree of confusion among drivers and local authorities, which could lead to an avalanche of penalty charge notices being wrongly issued and then having to be appealed. This will inevitably lead to an unnecessarily high level of appeals for local authorities to review, as well as some poor outcomes for drivers. Well, I said I think there you'll just find your appeal gets rejected. You can take it to an ombudsman, and in fact I did, and it was still rejected. So yeah, they're worried basically that as there's no guidance to updating these the guidance, it's been these schemes have been up and running for 15 years in London, and basically that it's unfair. The AA have also called on councils that apply for enforcement powers to identify potential fine hotspots, but to suspend enforcement till the problems that are causing the hotspot are rectified. And they said drivers should be issued with a warning letter for first-time offences before being fined. London traffic penalty adjudicators continue to highlight instances of bad road layout or councils ignoring or simply not understanding the rules for enforcement, the AA said. With most innocent drivers paying up instead of contesting unjustified PCNs, councils can haul in tens of thousands of pounds in fines and locations they know to be traps. My advice, if you get a ticket, appeal it on principle. You probably won't win, but you never know, you might get lucky. Right, and just before I sign off for this particular show, the last of my recorded shows, don't forget that it's the last call for the Survival Skills Mini Ride Out, which is a gentle pace, modest distance ride for a small group, where the emphasis is on enjoying the roads, scenery and company. April's ride out, Saturday 23rd of April at 10 a.m. It's free, but it is pre-book only, and I do emphasize that. Please don't turn up on the day hoping to go for a ride, because I won't let you join. I'll only let those who have pre-booked, so I can keep the group small and manageable. So if you fancy that, if it sounds like it floats your boat, check the usual place for the booking and drop your name in there. As I say, it won't cost you anything, it's totally free. So right, that is the end of today's show. So thank you again for tuning in. I'll see you with the next one live if all goes to plan. So meanwhile, if you are out and about on your bike today, enjoy your ride, but do stay shiny side up.